This week in the enterprise security news, Platform 9 unburdens users from the complexities of Kubernetes. Swimlane raises $40 million. SonicWall is hacked by a 0-day in its own product? ? Deloitte buys Route 9B. Sigilant and Sentinel-1 form a partnership. Fortinet announces AI-powered XDR. AlgoSec announces updates to its A32 product. ESA launches enhanced cloud-based endpoint security management. Entrust acquires HighTrust. A lot of trust happening there. Logarithm acquires Mistnet. And Huntress acquires EDR technology firm Level Effect. In the second segment, we welcome Fredrik Nordberg Almroth. He's from Detectify. He wrote the article that was discussing his research into DNS hijacking with the goal of controlling a top-level domain. In the final segment, Allan Alford from the Cyber Ranch podcast joins us for a discussion on the ever-popular topic of supply chain security. Stay tuned for all that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. As your attack surface stretches from the data center to the cloud and the device edge, security teams need visibility across it all to confidently detect and respond to threats. Experience frictionless hybrid security that helps you stop breaches 84% faster with ExtraHop's Reveal X360, the first and only SaaS-delivered network detection and response. Explore the interactive demo at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. Face it, your data is everywhere. No matter where your data lives or what tools you use, Imperva Data Security unifies compliance, security, and privacy needs for any data store while saving you time and money. Imperva finds threats before they become a compliance or security incident, and built-in automation empowers you to remediate quickly. Give your business confidence about what is happening with your data, where it's stored, and who's accessing it. For a 30-day free trial of cloud data security, visit securityweekly.com/Imperva. Can we continue to function without facts? Cybercriminals exploit the absence of facts, harming organizations through the easiest point of entry, email. No company should claim they can stop all phishing attacks. It's about having all the facts in seconds and reducing the time it takes to respond. It's minutes versus hours in the difference between a security incident and a breach. Great Horn. See through the dark. To learn more, go to securityweekly.com/Greathorn. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly, episode number 214, being recorded on January 27th, 2021. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, joined remotely by Adrian Sanabria. Adrian, welcome. Oh, I think you're on mute. Oh, there you are. That was weird. It was like there was like a delay.
Yeah, and I'm even in the same time zone. I don't know.
No, it looks good now. It just needed to catch up with itself. You're good. Welcome, Adrian. Mr. Tyler Shields is here with us. Tyler, welcome.
Hopefully my bits won't delay as they traverse the internet.
That's right. Make sure your bits don't delay. That's important. Do you have a specific guest or topic that you'd like us to cover on one of the shows? Submit your suggestions for guest by visiting securityweekly.com/guest. Complete the form. We review suggestions on a monthly basis and reach out once they're reviewed. I'm also kind of on a mission since we do have some slots to fill. So if you get a message from me like on LinkedIn or a Twitter DM, it's probably because I want you on the show. So some lucky individuals will get a personal invite on the show. Learn how to conquer cloud complexity in our first webcast of 2021. Myself, Adrian, and Dr. Mike Lloyd from Red Seal are doing a webcast tomorrow, actually, at 11 a.m., talking about how to conquer the cloud complexity problem. Of course, we'll talk about epidemiology, how that relates to cloud complexity and how to solve it. It's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure you tune in for nothing else than me, Adrian, and Mike really just kind of hanging out and talking. Our preparation for this webcast has been so much fun. I can't wait for tomorrow. Let's see. Go to security. Oh, sorry, Adrian. Did I get something wrong? I feel like it is tomorrow, right?
I was just going to say, Yeah, no, it's tomorrow. I was just going to say, to give you an idea, like every time we have a conversation with this guy, we're like, damn, we should have recorded that.
Right? Yes. Tomorrow we get to record it. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
SecurityWeekly.com/webcasts. Of course, if you missed any of our previous webcasts, you can go to SecurityWeekly.com/on-demand. Now on to the stories for this week. I wanted to start with a weird one because I saw this company in the news, and I don't want to knock anyone, but when I've been researching various categories in cybersecurity, I came across Route 9B. I feel like they've got like a weird history. I don't know if you guys saw this one.
I feel like you're being conservative when you say a weird history.
I'm trying to be nice. Yeah, I'm trying to be nice because I haven't really validated any of the facts. Other than like I've just seen weird stuff. I did link to an article from Krebs on Security, which is a reputable source that does quote other people who have looked into the history of the company, and it just really like basically it was an anonymous researcher, so one of his sources, whom you could extend that trust to, of course. They said they delved into Route 9B's finances because they were public for a while. It was a worthless reverse merger created by insiders with a long history of penny stock wipeouts, fraud allegations, and disaster.
So my understanding, they were in the news a couple of years ago when all that kind of blew up and melted down, is that there were two different Route 9Bs.
Yeah,
there were two different companies, and most of that was attached to one side, and then there was, like what we're talking about today was the more legitimate side.
The other side. That still rings exists. A bell too. Yeah, because I want to say I was looking at them for being in like a threat hunting category, and it sounded like there was a services component and a product component to the company, if memory serves me correctly. And then there was all kinds of weird stuff. And then like I stopped tracking them because I thought they got bought before, but they may have sold off another part of the company or whatever. But Deloitte has bought them, but it sounds like this acquisition is for the talent in the services side, because there's some DoD people, former military, that sounds like that's where the company got its start.
There's nothing shady going on there at all. It should be totally fine. Why would Deloitte want to connect their brand with that?
I'm not sure.
Scares the hell out of me.
Because everyone's forgotten 3 years ago.
Except us, because we looked at it and we were like, wait, I remember that. There was some fishy stuff going on. Yeah.
We remember.
Yeah. We remember. I can't remember yesterday, so this was new news to me.
So, kind of interesting. It sounds like they were just acquiring the talent. So hopefully,
yeah, it's got to be an acqui-hire kind of thing. Just maybe a little bit of IP, but mostly grabbing the people. But even so, would you want to acquire the people that are affiliated with that? Because 3 years ago, I would imagine the smart talent took off, not wanting to be part of that, out of the drama, right?
Well, I think the other thing too, Tyler, is like their marketing engine. When I went back and read the Krebs article, was amazing. I think that's why it came on my radar as being like in categories inside, because like their marketing was amazing, but it was like very put up on a pedestal, and there was really little behind it, is what the article kind of alludes to. So
all sizzle, no steak.
Yes, that's kind of what the Krebs article was alluding to. So you can read that. Our link to the Krebs article and the announcement is in the show notes. So a stroll down memory lane.
Or maybe Route 9B is thinking, do we really want to be associated with Deloitte? How about that?
Could be.
Well played.
Swim Lane has raised $40 million to expand the SOAR business. One of the, is it one of the few pure play SOAR vendors left still raising money that hasn't been acquired, right? Because we can, again, go down memory lane, and this is where my memory gets bad, Tyler. Because Palo Alto bought Demisto and not Twistlock. One of them went to Splunk. Phantom went to Splunk. Those were two of the big players, right?
CSG Invotus went to FireEye.
Yep. So like all the big security companies bought something in there. It was like, well, they have one, so we need one too, and everyone bought up.
I think you're right.
The pure play SOAR, and Swim Lane remains kind of on its own.
I think a few others popped up late, came to the market late, and I can't think of their names off the top of my head, but I think there are a couple other late to market pure plays out there. But
I want to say Simplify, who I believe I had put in the news but didn't make it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I had something from Simplify in there. I really like Simplify, and they're kind of in that space, but more heavily focused on helping the SOC. And I've done briefings and demos, and I really like Simplify. I thought they had a funding announcement, but
yeah, they're definitely in the source space, but SOC focused.
Yep.
Yeah, what makes this acquisition pretty interesting, though, is that it's a private equity acquisition, so it's not just an infusion of venture capital. It's actually going to be an operating type of scenario.
Oh, so the swim lane one, is that?
Yeah, if I'm reading it right, funding round was led by private equity firm Energy Impact Partners.
Gotcha.
So they're kind of going in there. My guess is, I don't know anything about swim lanes, revenue numbers, growth rate, run rate, any of that. But it's likely one of those scenarios where we didn't have a place to land.
Yep.
Let's go ahead and get a private equity to infuse a big chunk of cash, take a big chunk of the company itself, and let's make it run leaner, and then maybe find a big place to land.
Yep. That's good, great analysis, Tyler. I agree.
I've been through enough of those squeezing. I've been through enough of the squeezing blood from the turnip acquisitions that I can see them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's see. Platform 9 is making a play in the Kubernetes. I thought it was interesting. So they allow DevOps teams to complete freedom to run multiple versions of managed Kubernetes across staging, production, and development environments. I mean, that alone, just reading that sentence, I'm like, that sounds really complicated. I applaud the DevOps teams that are in that position to even have the requirement to have that software that helps them management. And good Lord, you better hope you have that software to help you manage Kubernetes across multiple different versions of managed Kubernetes across all three environments. It's crazy.
That sounds like hell. I mean, quite frankly, I think they also need somebody in their marketing team to step up and simplify what they're talking about so normal people can understand it.
Well, there's always that.
Yeah. I mean, that's too common. Far too common in these press releases that we read. Yeah,
and the Fortinet one definitely. I don't know if it's a complication issue, more so a terminology issue. So the headline reads: Fortinet announces AI-powered XDR for threat detection, investigation, and response. Very buzzwordy. We've got a segment coming up, I think it's this week, to just talk about on PSW what the heck is XDR. Because you ask different people and you get very different answers. They're calling it FortiXDR, which, I think if you're going to call it something, I like the Forti moniker for Fortinet, right? So it says it's the only solution of its kind to leverage artificial intelligence for the investigation effort critical to incident response. I mean, to say that's a stretch would be putting it nicely. It's more like a flat out lie. Or, I mean, if you don't know about those other solutions, can you claim that? Not really. That's why we're here, right? to call that stuff out. Likely not the only solution to apply AI to the incident response problem.
I don't know about you, Paul, but I can't wait to start testing these.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then the XDR difficulty and even understanding what XDR is as far as a unified platform for what today, right? So it's just vague on top of vague. And then, of course, we AI it, because if you AI it, it's better.
More likely, machine learning is a good application to the technologies if you were to kind of theorize about what would make up XDR. I come back to my enchanting quadrants. We had a great interview Monday on Business Security Weekly, and Matt from Extra Hop was really kind of aligned with my quadrants, right? So I've got endpoint. You need data from the endpoint. You need data from all your other log sources that we typically call SIM. You need data from the network, and you need threat intelligence to kind of help you sort through it. And not threat intelligence, I've gotten some flack for that, but not just, domains and IP addresses, but intelligence as to how attacks are happening so that you can go to those other sources and be able to correlate that. When you look at all those data sources, you need some type of machine learning to help you make sense of it. And applying the right machine learning to the right data sources is where it's at. I don't get any of that kind of analysis from this Fortinet announcement. They're just like, we have XDR and it's AI powered. I'm like,
It's too high level an announcement to really know anything from that. I mean, we'd have to dig into the actual tech and find somebody who can explain how the AI and the ML works, what the clusters are, what the feature vectors are,
right?
What the important points within the machine learning is built upon.
I kind of see two trends across all the stories here. One of them is either adding to the problem. We've got a few EDR announcements here, where, they're going to gather more data for you. And the rest of it is, all this data we're gathering, like we don't know how to do anything with it. It's these things are too complicated. Here's a product that's going to help you manage that. So we've got the, SOAR. Yeah, that's what SOAR is all about. Orchestrating and automating things. The Kubernetes announcement, is about managing the mess. The Sigilant and Sentinel-1, automated cybersecurity again. And, it's all along those lines, so at some point, you start to think like, how many products am I buying to fix the issues with the other products I already own?
It's very
expense in depth.
Ooh, yeah. I like that. Did you just come up with that, or is that?
No. I'm going to attribute that to my friend Rick Holland from a long time ago. He may have made it up. He may have stole it from somebody else, but I love the term.
Yeah, Rick swears it didn't come from him, but I learned it from him also. So I think he definitely gets credited with popularizing it.
Well, and I can see folks easily falling, going down this rabbit hole, because you go back to my quadrants. Well, I need this solution to help me collect data from, the network. Maybe need a couple solutions there. And then I need something to help me collect data from the endpoint. And then I need something that's going to take all the data from all the rest of my stuff and help me make sense of that. And now I've got all these solutions, and I need another solution to help me make sense of all the other solutions. And then, you just go down a rabbit hole.
Well, and we can even throw a little bit more fuel on that fire. Define data, right? So there's data as far as event data, what is happening in the environment. But now there's configuration data, there's operational data, there's security as code data, there's infrastructure as code data. All of that stuff is expanding how we define data. And I'm just so confused and tired of the breadth of point solutions that just overlap. There's the Venn diagrams are so overlapping, it's getting ridiculous.
Yeah. We're going to have some interesting conversations coming up, both I think on our webcast and this week on PSW, is, how much data is enough data? Do you take everything and try and make sense of it? Because there's definitely people in that camp, Google's Chronicle and all their solutions like fall in that camp of, well, just give me everything and I'll help you make sense of it. There's other, I think Deepwatch and talking with their folks, they've got a very different approach. And I'm not saying, it's right or wrong, but it's a different approach, which I think is refreshing. They're like, give me the specific feeds of data, and these are the ones that are more valuable. And there's other folks in that camp as well. What's the answer for you, right? I think it's going to depend on the situation and the talent and the technologies that you have and your processes as to where you fall on that spectrum. But certainly when we talk about epidemiology, I think this is one of the things we were talking about with Mike. I don't know how much we'll talk about it on the webcast, but epidemiology, they're starving for data. In cybersecurity, there is no shortage of data. I mean, because you can turn on a network tap and you can turn some logging on, and you can go to your database and turn on query logging, and boy, you've got a ton of data. There is no shortage of that. But how to make sense of it all is really where we still struggle, and we talk about just glomming on solutions until we get down to the right answer. Is that really helping us get to the right answer or not?
Well, I'm excited about some of the analysis models that are starting to come into play, where it's sure you have data, and any individual data point in isolation is valuable, but you really start to get into value when you understand the relationships between data points. And the problem with that is that it becomes an exponential growth problem, because you may have one piece of data and another piece of data. You had the third one and they all interoperate. You had the fourth one, they all interoperate. And when you're talking billions of data points with a total mesh connected relationship model, the growth gets staggeringly huge and makes analysis so difficult. That's why I think a lot of the technologies are driving towards graph-based analysis for the data analysis side of cybersecurity now.
Just going off on a slightly different tangent, Entrust acquires HighTrust. if we need more confusion in names. I was actually kind of glad to see them both in the same one.
Trust squared.
Right? I think, I don't know if they're going to rename or it's all going to be Entrust, but we see these keywords in a lot of vendor names and they tend to breed some confusion, right? Trust is certainly one of them. So, but they say Entrust adds a critical management layer for encryption, cryptographic keys, and cloud security policies to its digital security solution. Interesting.
I feel like they had to do this because people got them confused so much. They're like, let's just
buy them, right? Could be. Not as confusing. Logarithm acquires MistNet. The acquisition will allow Logarithm, according to the report, to deliver intelligent machine learning-based detection and response capabilities that incorporate network detection, user and entity behavior analytics. Well, I haven't used that UEBA term in a while. Endpoint detection and response, or EDR, in addition to the MITRE attack detections to solve current emerging security and risk problems. Wow, that's a mouthful, huh?
Yeah, I think Logarithm started moving in this direction a while ago, and they were one of the first SIMs that I remember, saying, okay, just collecting the data isn't enough. We need to, start, building out our product, to where it can actually, do some useful analysis of this. And even just a couple years ago, a lot of the traditional older SIM tools. I often describe more as development platforms. It's months before you get any value out of them. You've got to build all your alerts, all your reports from scratch, based on what you need. And it's, I think it's good to see people or to see SIMs heading more in this direction. And I hope it's helping and not just adding, to the alert fatigue problem there.
What they really want to be is a single pane of glass.
Oh, that term. Oh, dear God.
Well, I mean, this is.
I did that just to plant the seed and see what would happen.
I mean, that's part of the, you're going to talk about this, tomorrow, I assume, but that's part of the idea with XDR, right? To put a more useful layer on top of all the data coming out of EDR and network stuff. And, it's leaving less of that to the buyer to have to build themselves. At least I hope that's where it's going. That's what it seems like the value prop is to me.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you look at the quadrants, and most people agree with the quadrants or have some similar variation, and do you get the best of breed for you, right? You evaluate and you get maybe some smaller players that can check some boxes in each of those quadrants, or do you go to someone like a Logarithm who actually does a fairly decent job in all of those quadrants? Obviously stronger in the SIM quadrant because that's where they came from, but you see a lot of the larger players now in cybersecurity really wanting to play in all those quadrants and bring it all together. And really, the single pane of glass is that marketing term for really like, hey, just come to us. We'll help you get the data from your endpoint, from the network, from all of the rest of your logs, and we'll throw on a layer of threat intelligence on top of that and give you a system to be able to manage and respond to the incidents that arise. Adrian, to your point, I think it's months, right, before you can actually configure that and tune that for your environment for a lot of these solutions. I've not configured Logarithm's full solution, right? But their customers that have done that seem pretty happy and they do some really cool things. And there's lots of other vendors in that space. So I think there's we're at kind of like a crossroads moving forward now as to where do you shift your investments, right? Is it that one platform that can take care of a lot of things for you, or do you start tying these other platforms together?
Yeah, and I think well, first of all, what kind of, or is this a generic quadrant we're talking about, or is this a trademarked quadrant we're talking about here?
Oh, this is what I call Paul's enchanted quadrants.
Okay, yes, good.
They're enchanted.
I don't want to get people upset, but yeah, I'm sure Tyler's got an opinion on this too. But the amount of development work it takes to get to value with, I mean, classically with SIMs. Even before we threw EDR on top of it, and all the new stuff, the UBEA and that the industry has thrown on top of it. We didn't have the SIM problem solved yet. The only companies I knew that were happy with their SIMs had full-time SIM developers that would just build those reports and take use cases from the security team and implement those. So I still think that's an unsolved problem is getting that to a point to where the average company can achieve that. I mean, just adding log sources, as somebody's pointing out in the Discord, is a huge pain with just about all the SIMs.
I think this is the rise, what I'm going to call the rise of the security engineer. And I think security operations people, they're going to do what they do, analysts, SEC analysts. But in reality, the rise of the security engineer is going to come over the top of that, because security will cease to be an operational discipline or less of an operational discipline and lean heavily into engineering security into your environment, right? And that's where companies like Netflix, Facebook, et cetera, they have huge security engineering teams to deliver on that exact value, integrating tools, gaining data from tools, figuring out how the analytics work at a higher order, right, rather than just a basic tool order. And so I think you're going to see a rise of human resources to get us there until the technology mergers occur that will eventually drive that into the product lines.
Amen.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think that's a trend that, I don't want to say this year. I hate attaching trends to years and stuff like that. But moving forward, I do want to see less of an operational role in security and being more of the role you described, Tyler and Adrian, right? That we're helping put the pieces together and do the architecture, but the actual operations piece are done by the operations folks in development, in IT, right, in ops, in all of those different disciplines, in the help desk, across IT, and security is providing that, is enabling those other business groups, really.
If security is done right, it ceases to become a term. So what I mean by that, if we think back to mobile security, back when mobile security was a thing, in general, at the highest level, mobile security has been done right into those devices. Now, don't get me wrong, there's still hacks, there's still issues, but it's way better than other security platforms, right? And we don't really see mobile security as a vendor market as much anymore because it's kind of baked into what you do. So if we win, security ceases to exist, which is exactly what we would want to strive toward.
Well, it ceases to exist for that one thing, but there's always new things, and security bridges that gap. And I agree. I've always pushed for security as being more of a, consultant firm, consulting group within the company, that you go to with those kinds of questions that are kind of thinking at a higher level, big picture, or even at a tactical level, looking at the threats of the day, to advise the different groups. But when you go in and you look at most security teams, it's all operational stuff. It's like, that's the guy that runs the vulnerability scanner. Like everybody has some dashboard or pane of glass that they log into every morning, log out of before they go home every night. And none of them are really doing security work. They're just managing these tools that we buy, that we spend most of our budget on. And it's kind of a waste. But yeah.
I did want to hit one more story. SonicWall has been in the news, and the headlines have been reading that it's been hit by attackers leveraging a zero-day vulnerability in their own products. I don't see any direct evidence. I don't see, as of like yesterday morning or so, SonicWall having any statements stating that it was in fact a 0-day, unless people have better sources than I do, which is really not saying much. But I did find it interesting that in the article, in an update to this article, SonicWall said they wanted to let us know that the guidance to disable virtual office and the HTTPS administrative interface no longer applies. So likely there's not a 0-day in the HTTPS interface if they're recommending that you don't have to turn that off, which could have fueled maybe some of the rumors happening here, but we still don't know what the root cause of this particular breach is unless new news has broken, and I haven't seen it yet, but kind of interesting.
So it's too bad that the chat with Allan is going to be the third segment, because that's an excellent pivot into that conversation.
Yeah.
Because I suspect he'd say, look, it shouldn't matter whether or not they're hacked at the supply chain level. When your sonic wall or whatever appliances you have start doing weird, suspicious stuff, it should just look like weird, suspicious stuff. You shouldn't be worried about, like, you shouldn't be depending on the news to tell you when your stuff is acting weird.
Right.
And I know that's not easy. Like it's kind of crappy to say that, because when you're actually trying to operationalize that, you realize how hard it is to create a useful baseline that you can use to point out anomalies.
Cool. One last story. Huntress acquired EDR technology firm Level Effect, and that link is in there for you to read. I think that's all the stories. With that, we'll take a short break and come back with Detectify on DNS hijacking. Stay tuned. Data protection is a top priority with today's work-from-home workforce. However, current data loss prevention tools inadequately protect data in cloud or SaaS offerings from insider threats. Secure Circle automatically protects data as it leaves SaaS services such as GitHub, AWS, and Salesforce. The protection is transparent to users and works with any application to persistently protect data, even source code. Secure your data with Secure Circle's Zero Trust Data Protection. Begin your 30-day free trial by visiting securityweekly.com/Secure Circle. Cybercriminals are opportunistically targeting industries that continue to operate full tilt during the coronavirus shutdowns, and their attacks have grown more sophisticated. Given this shifting landscape, taking the appropriate countermeasures becomes paramount. Mimecast Email Security 3.0 helps you evolve from a perimeter-based security strategy to one that is comprehensive and pervasive with cyber resiliency in mind. From the company that stops at nothing to block cyber threats, Mimecast is offering a fully featured 90-day web security service. Visit securityweekly.com/Mimecast to learn more. You want to get the right things done for your security program. Sounds simple, but what are the right things for you? What does done mean? And how are you going to get there? Rapid7 realizes more than anyone how hard this can be. While Rapid7's Insight platform offers you industry-leading vulnerability management and detection and response solutions, their focus is on understanding where you are so that they can help you get where you're going. Visit securityweekly.com/Rapid7 to get started. If you want to stay in the loop on all things Security Weekly, please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe. You can subscribe to our shows via your favorite podcast catcher. All the shows on our network. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, our mailing list, and even join our Discord server at securityweekly.com/subscribe. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. Very excited for our guest on this segment. Fredrik Nordberg Almroth joins us to discuss DNS hijacking and domain takeovers. Fredrik, I followed Detectify. I feel like a creepy stalker now. I followed Detectify for a long time and always appreciated the ninja security researchers that were behind that company. So I'm very excited to have you on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you.
Fredrik, I read the story as you were kind of like bored over holiday break, because things tend to quiet down over holiday break, and needed some good security research to do, and kind of stumbled into this domain DNS hijacking that led to being able to control much of a top level domain. So I'll turn it over to you to tell the story.
Right. So. Yeah, it was during Christmas times. I had nothing better to do, spending time with family and things, and I just opened my laptop. And I've historically, during the past 5 or so years, I've been spotting various DNS misconfigurations. So I thought, subdomains can be compromised in various ways, like if you have a CNAME pointer to Heroku or something, and there is no page there to host an application. Then sometimes you have a window of opportunity as an attacker to sign up on one of these SaaS providers and spin up your own application in the name of someone else. So I was thinking, why don't I look at a top level domain or one level above than just one organization? So I pulled down all TLDs globally, and I decided to look explicitly at the name server delegations, because all the new top level domains, we have many hundreds of them now. So I was thinking maybe something somewhere is broken in some aspect. So one thing led to another. I made a script, and it turned out that .cd Congo, their TLD they had a couple of name server delegations, but one of them went to a domain called scptnetwork.com. And it was a bit troublesome. Half of the name servers didn't reply to any incoming DNS questions. So I just got serve fail as a status code back. And that led me to investigate, because, it's a top level domain that shouldn't happen. Turned out that the domain was about to expire. So one thing led to another. I made a script that monitored the EPP status of the domain. Mm-hmm. And to my surprise, just before New Year, the status changed to pending deletion. And all of a sudden, it was up for grabs for anyone on the internet. So I simply bought the domain. Started looking at the incoming DNS questions.
That's kind of scary that, the top level domains have DNS servers that they point to for delegation to resolve names, and that you would let one of those DNS servers expire. And like you said, anyone could have registered that. And now, you don't necessarily control the top level domain, but you control DNS resolution for that top level domain if you control the DNS server, correct?
That is correct. As every .cd question, or in this case, 50% of them would hit my domain. That would mean that any incoming .cd lookup would also hit me. So I could see all the Google.cd questions coming in. Mm-hmm. And DNSSEC was not enforced. So I could just as well have replied to those questions and pointed Google.cd somewhere else. That's a scary reality.
I have to ask a real quick question. How much does it cost to buy that domain?
That domain, I bought it for $12.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, best $12 you ever spent.
Right?
Yeah. You could say that.
So
it's a scary arbitrage.
So and then the follow-on question to that is, once you grab it, do they come after you? Do they start complaining? Like, what was the fallout?
It's a good story. Like I've done quite a bit of bug bounty during the past couple of years, but doing it at this scale, it kind of undermines the part of the internet infrastructure. So I had quite a hard time figuring out, like, what do I do? Like, who do I contact? And more importantly, like how do I mitigate it? So one thing led to another, and I eventually reached out to the two contact persons at IANA's webpage, sent them an email like, hey, I bought this domain. Your names or your TLD is pointing towards it. It delegates to me. Like, can I transfer it to you? Or like, do you want to fix it yourself? Change the delegations of the TLD? Mm. And then I never heard anything back. Day after, I noticed via some dig tracing that, they had updated the TLD, so it no longer went to me.
So they just took it back.
Sorry?
Yeah. I said, so they just straight up took it back. Thank you for letting us know it's ours now.
Yeah, pretty much. They removed the investigations from the domain.
If you hadn't said anything, would they have even noticed?
I doubt it. There was, you have the redundancy, right? That's why you want multiple NS pointers. And as long as it didn't reply with anything bogus, the DNS clients, the resolvers all around the internet, they would fall back to the legitimate servers that actually reply to the questions.
Now, Fredrik, had you not been a responsible security researcher, had you been a very evil person, an evil bad guy, what could you have done just for our audience to understand the repercussions of losing control of one of your DNS servers, especially for a top-level domain?
Yeah, essentially, man in the middle. Any incoming question I can reply to. That means that if you are sitting at home and you want to go to google.cd, that traffic has to propagate throughout the internet through various resolvers. And half of that traffic will hit me. So if I just reply to that, everything will work out. I can say that google.cd now goes to the IP address 1.3.3.7, and the traffic would start going there. And that's worse yet. You can weaponize this a lot further. So say that you use SSL, right? As most websites do nowadays, or that's the trend, right? Using something like Let's Encrypt DNS validation, it should be possible to issue new certificates in another organization's name. And by that point, if I can issue an SM certificate and also control the A pointers to hit my server, that's what stops me from completely strip away the SSL, unless you have something like certificate pinning in place. It's nothing really.
So provided you can create a website that looks like the one legitimate website, which, as we know, is not very difficult to do. You can pretend to be the banking infrastructure for that country.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But, I mean, there are so many potential venues for attack. I mean, if I don't reply to a question, eventually it will hit the right route. But say if I, in 1 in 100 incoming questions for some very specific target, I replied with an IP address to my server and spin up a phishing page, everything would work out. The domain name is identical, might even have a legitimate SSL certificate that's trusted in your browser. But then it starts getting really scary.
Yeah, because it's more the scale, right? And I think of years ago, this particular attack happened in Mexico, and they would find routers that were vulnerable, and they would change the DNS servers inside the routers. Those were largely legitimate DNS servers, except if you went to the banking websites that were popular in Mexico, that would go to a spoof, the fake page, and they were scraping people's, financial information and accounts. But that's still on a scale pretty small, right? Because we're talking about you have to have one of those vulnerable routers, and it is a very individual kind of thing. In your attack scenario, I spend $12, right, and then I can start spinning up infrastructure to take over basically 50% of the requests for an entire country.
Yeah, I mean, Congo is not a small country. It's roughly 90 million people there. I don't even know how many thousands of domain names that exist. Not to mention all the DNS traffic I got during that brief moment. I think it hit a peak with like 1,500 incoming DNS questions per second that I could just reply to anyone with whatever.
And so, I mean, to fix this problem, is this really just kind of an education thing for folks, which I feel like we need to do, because I don't know, I'm reminded of this other article, I think it was somewhere in South Africa, that one of the pages from one of the government departments used Flash, and rather than converting that form into a very basic, HTML5 form, they created their own web browser that had a version of Flash in it. And so to access that site, you have to get this browser now with the Flash player in it. But that browser is limited only to go to like that one website. I feel like there's a lot of education we need to do, especially to governments across the world, about the proper ways to address some of these issues.
Yeah, I can only agree. I mean, in this case, the DNSSEC would have mitigated a lot of the potential bad stuff I could have pulled off. It would have put me kind of in a more transparent position where I could see the incoming questions but not really modify them. But the DNSSEC is not widely deployed anywhere. So for me, as a security researcher, I should know DNSSEC, I feel. I still don't, but at least it would verify the integrity of the domain name. I can't make domain names out of thin air, which I could now in this case. So yeah, I can only agree. Like, to solve things like this kind of attack, it has to be on a national level, international level. Like, countries must help each other out.
Yeah, I agree. I also put this in the category of some of the email security SMTP, technologies like DKIM and SPF, which really only work if everyone's doing it. DNSSEC is, in that same category, and I think there needs to be some evangelism at a global scale, which is not a small undertaking, to raise awareness, about some of these issues.
Lots of people have tried to do that evangelism, and lots of people have failed or gotten minor contribution, right? So it's a bigger problem that would have to be probably solved at a government dictation level where they mandate something, or it'll never get there.
Right.
But I mean, let's be real. $12, that's got to be a nation state level attack to be able to afford a $12 attack. I mean, that's super expensive.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all about arbitrage. You don't necessarily need to spend a lot of money to pull off some really crazy attacks. It's just persistence is key. Now I was lucky.
Follow-on question for you with that: if your script was running and you popped the one TLD, do you still have a script running looking for other TLDs that may be vulnerable?
Yeah, I mean, after this proved to be successful, I kind of modified the script to run as a cron job over and over to look for more anomalies going forward. Because apparently this is a thing and it works. So I figured, why not?
Hey, at least we have you as the police then.
That's right.
Yeah, as long as my servers are up and running.
Yeah.
So Paul and I have been talking a lot about attack surface monitoring and management. And, I think generally you think about monitoring and managing things that you own, but upstream attacks like this, maybe the higher level providers, internet providers, a lot of the BGP kerfuffles that we see all the time, this stuff that we're talking about today. Yeah, I'm curious if you've seen any tools that monitor this kind of thing, like you're doing with your scripts, or if you think that it seems to me like that should be something that somebody is monitoring. That should be threat intelligence that's pretty easy to gather and keep track of.
I can't say I know of any tools that does it on a global scale, but shameless plug. My company, Detectify, we do asset monitoring of internet exposed things that you own as an organization. One of those being primarily domain names. And this is one of the attacks that we look on, but on an apex level, but not on an internet-wide level. One thing led to another. That's why I started looking on a bigger scale.
Yeah,
you might have just created a new product,
right? Yeah, it's interesting to
yeah, maybe,
right, to think about the scope. As you said, Fredrik, your company Detectify will monitor not just your websites for vulnerabilities, but also some of the things that are around your domains. To Adrian, to your point, looking at the internet as a whole and how you might be impacted by someone else misconfiguring something is very interesting. And I'm curious if there is coverage for that across, who provides coverage for that, or if it's something we have to police ourselves. Certainly, I can tell you one thing for certain, with almost 100% certainty, is that attackers are looking at it. Right? We don't want to leave it to them. Well, Fredrik, thank you so much for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly today. Thank you for your research and your contributions to the community.
Thank you for having me.
With that, we'll take a short break. Come back with Allan Alford coming up next. Stay tuned. Enterprises struggle to detect advanced attacks quickly and thoroughly as evolving threats continue to evade current security tools. Skillful threat detection starts with diverse, high-value security telemetry to run detections on. The Chronicle platform allows security teams to store and analyze petabytes of data in one place so that you can quickly apply powerful detection rules against all of your security data. Learn more about the Chronicle platform and the latest threat detection capabilities at securityweekly.com/Chronicle. Today's networks are changing fast, and employees, devices, and infrastructures are more distributed than ever. Gigamon Threat Insight is a cloud-native, high-velocity network detection and response solution that's purpose-built to enable you to get in front of this transformation. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Gigamon. Uptycs has built a platform for SQL-powered security analytics. Extending the OS Query agent, Uptycs collects, aggregates, and analyzes a wide range of system data and makes that available to solve multiple security challenges. Their solution provides visibility across Linux, macOS, Windows, containers, and cloud workloads. Their customers are using the Uptycs platform for fleet visibility, intrusion detection, investigation, and audit and compliance. Visit securityweekly.com/upticks and be one of the first to see how they've mapped over 500 behavioral rules to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. If you happen to miss Security Weekly Unlocked, that was our virtual conference that happened in December of 2020. You can access all of the content on demand, whether you registered before the live event or not, by visiting securityweekly.com/unlocked, clicking either the button to register or the button to log in. So make sure you go do that because there's lots of cool stuff there. For this segment, we are joined by Allan Alford from the Cyber Ranch podcast and other podcasts as well to talk about supply chain security in the face of SolarWinds. Allan, welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yes. Now, Allan, we were on one of David Sparks' podcasts. What was that one called? I don't remember the name of that one now.
Defense in Depth.
Defense in Depth. So you do that one with David Spark as well as the Cyber Ranch. Is that your own podcast?
Well, so I've left Defense in Depth and launched the Cyber Ranch podcast on my own. I'm going out solo and doing all my own production now. So scary journey, but having fun so far.
Outstanding. Congratulations. It's awesome. Now, Allan, we're going to talk about supply chain security, which is, we've already kind of hinted towards it. We talked a little bit about the SonicWall story and kind of theorizing, like, was it a supply chain attack against SonicWall, or was it just a straight up attack against SonicWall to get in their supply chain? Like, we've got all these supply chains that are depending on supply chains. How do we get a handle on it, and what should the priority be, more importantly, in our enterprise security programs today?
So I guess I want to step back from the current incident just a moment. And I want to talk about supply chain security in general and the fact that it's always been an issue. It always will be an issue. And it's something that we've always needed to pay real attention to. I think the latest episode, this whole SolarWinds debacle, everything that transpired there has shined some real light on it. And I think if we want to walk away from that experience with a particular pointer or tip that we need to think through, I would argue that the only real pointer or tip we need to think through at this point in the face of that one is this simple fact. Now everyone on the planet knows it's been done once. It's possible it's been done 100 other times, but now everyone knows it's doable. And so copycat, future attacks are imminent. I would argue that now that this is out there in this public, that all the bad guys are now looking at how they can possibly pull this off. So I think we need to be ready in the face of that. But at a high level, like I said at the beginning, I don't know that we need to be any more or less ready than we always should have been.
Yeah, it's that's a great point, Allan. And we've covered it so many times in the past 15 years. We'll cover an attack sometimes when it's really new and highly theoretical, and we'll cover it because that's our job. Like, that's kind of interesting, but we don't see it in the wild. And you see that with a lot of reports from vendors. They're like, we have this vulnerability, but we don't see it in the wild. But once an attacker or group of attackers pulls off a wildly successful attack and uses one or more of those techniques that maybe in previous times were theoretical or just used by very few people in very obscure attacks that it doesn't really bubble to the surface. Now the question is, should that impact your prioritization of the remediation and defenses against these particular attacks is the real question, right? I think once we see a widely publicized attack that uses a technique, we can kind of surmise that, if we don't shore up our defenses against it, someone may the probability that someone may use it against us is higher. So it enters that, I think, the probability score in your risk formula, right?
Yeah, if you're looking at impact and likelihood, I think likelihood just went up. It did. Now, as to what we as practitioners can do about it and do against this threat, that's a whole nother conversation. I want to step first through, let's walk through the problem the same way the bad guys walked through it. It started with a vendor. And it started with a vendor whose actual build process and source code were compromised. It's a vendor whose product is designed specifically to be deployed everywhere, to have tendrils into everybody's everything, to be sniffing and detecting on a constant basis and reporting back to a mothership. And so the bad guys were very easily able to, once they were in that process and into that build tree and into that source code, get it to where, the monitoring and the sniffing were working in their favor. So high value target vendor, let's start with that, and a vendor whose entire code pipeline was compromised. And so we first have to ask ourselves, if we're going to deal with this, not what do we do as general practitioners, but what do we do as folks who might happen to be product vendors, right? And I did product security for 10 years before I became a CISO. I was all about the product side of the game for the longest time. And I'll tell you that it's not just network monitoring and management tools that are at risk here. Telecommunications. Think about the fact that you could compromise a video conferencing system or a telephone, and now you've got basically a bug. You've got a remote listening device and spying device. Think about the fact that you can compromise any kind of, obviously the network tools, but anything else. What about if your EDR or your next gen AV get compromised? Now the bad guys can launch all the attacks they want to, knowing that the EDR has been pre-programmed to not report and not, and to basically ignore this particular attack. So every one of the tools we use has its own degree of attractiveness to the bad guys. And so when we talk about likelihood and impact, I think we first have to triage what's in our supply chain and what matters the most to us. If you're not worried about your telephones, if you're not worried about sensitive information being transmitted over phones, then that should be a lower priority for you. If you're super worried about that you deal with a lot of sensitive information, video conferencing is key to your company. Let's say that Zoom itself gets compromised, right? You have to think through what the impact would be to you for a given vendor. So we start there. And then obviously as the vendors, this should be the wake-up call to everybody who makes a digital product. Everybody needs to be looking at their build process. Everybody needs to be looking at their digital signature process. Everything that they're doing to ensure the integrity of the product they're selling to us. I want every vendor out there to be wide awake on that one and scurrying and hurrying right now on that. And then for us practitioners, it's a matter, I think, of stack ranking what priorities we have based on what those vendors are and what they do in terms of our information processing.
Tyler, Adrian?
Yeah, so Alan, I totally agree with you. I've been working in the AppSec space forever and involved in multiple companies, Veracode, Sonatype, et cetera, that have been supply chain security companies. And I've seen these pops happen in different degrees of scariness, let's call it, in threat, where this is definitely one of the bigger ones, probably the biggest one that's ever occurred. But inevitably, you get the decay of care, right? So it pops and the vendor gets a bunch of money, the one that solves the problem, and indicates, that there's the likelihood goes up. People care. They try to shore things up. And then inevitably that decays over time. How do we fix the problem of spike in care that fades away and then the problem comes back in a year, 2 years? Any idea on that?
Right. So I've got a show coming up that I recorded with Omkar Arasaratnam, and we had this exact conversation. We talked about, he's got this great metaphor for it. When you're crossing the street, you look both ways. Every time you cross the street, you don't just check once a year. You don't just check once a quarter. And so we have to look at all the tooling and all the things we do today to address third-party risk. So let's put on the practitioner hat now. And we're talking about what do we have? Let's talk about everything that's at our disposal today that we use. Let's see, there's questionnaires, which could be proprietary, could be something like SIG-Lite. There's GRC tools who focus and track on third-party risk, and you can plug all the stuff in and track it and monitor it that way and keep it alive that way. To your point about you can become deadened to it or whatever might happen, you can track and keep alive in those tools. You've also got open source intelligence tools, like the third-party tools that do the sort of the credit score style approach that look at open source intelligence. And I've got a huge complaint with that whole niche of our industry, that I think the open source intelligence is of dubious value if it's even accurate in the first place. So I don't, I appreciate the real time aspect of that, but I don't know that I'm in agreement that that's really a meaningful set of data to be doing real time though. So I would argue that upping our game with the GRC tools is probably where we need to focus, upping our game with the questionnaires, coming up with more targeted questionnaires, and doing that right to audit, and actually spending the cycles renewing the questionnaire and renewing and exercising that right to audit. I think this becomes a people and process equation in terms of what we have to spend to try to tackle and address. And I think that that's the area we're going to have to focus on. I don't know that there's a magic bullet from a technology perspective where we can just assure ourselves that, my phones are safe, my video conferencing is safe, my EDR is safe, my network monitoring is safe. It's going to have to be a people and process story.
I totally agree. It's people, process. And then from a technology perspective, it's upgrading our security tools and technologies from being snapshot point in time style solutions to continuous, and flipping from sample-based analysis or sample set analysis to population-based analysis, where you're literally looking at everything continuously. And I think we're moving towards that as an industry, but we're just in the beginnings of that vision.
Agreed. And I would argue too that the migration to SaaS actually has a play here as well. The bad thing is going to happen. And so the original question was, how do we, prevent the bad thing? What do we do about it? But the follow-up question is, what do we do when it occurs? Because it will occur again. And I hated the fact that in this case, with this particular vendor, everybody had to wait on a patch, furiously go apply the patch, wait a couple more days for the next patch, furiously go apply that patch. If this was a SaaS-hosted real-time solution, it would have been so much easier on the remediation side. So I think we can't neglect that either when we talk about real-time.
It's interesting. We're talking about preventing, detecting, and mitigating sabotage, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what's going on. And coming from a vector that you don't have the same control and the same finesse over.
I still get anxiety every time I update my Linux systems and I run the apt command, and I'm just trusting that all the software is coming down from a trusted source, that they got it from a trusted source, that the open source projects have maintained integrity in their own code bases. It's a scary exercise every single time.
Yep. And what we've learned, and with open source, the value and the benefit is, in theory, if we have the time, and of course, who does this, you could comb through all that code yourself and verify and satisfy to your own satisfaction, right? Like, oh, okay, we're cool. There's no backdoors. There's no sneaky Pete, riders or hitchhikers or bad things embedded in this code. And it's the non-open source, to me, that's even more scary. We saw that with the SolarWinds breach, they were targeting still other pieces of the supply chain, right? They went after Microsoft. They went after Cox Communications. And so those are the things where you don't have that ability to look at source code. Those are the things where you're truly just trusting that this vendor has done everything they're supposed to do and, check the box and go. So it's a very different story, I think, with closed source than open source.
Well, and you're right. Even if the closed source, we did have the ability to audit it or look at it, who's got the time? The scale is so huge. The number of third-party vendors you have, the number of things you're pulling, you're apt updating or pulling from any one of the other, whether they're gems or NPM or there's so many repositories, WordPress plugins. That we're trusting every day, even Chrome extensions. It's everywhere. That problem is everywhere.
It is, and it's another argument for why we should always be trying to consolidate tech stack. There's obviously a million other benefits to consolidating your tech stack, but you're eliminating attack surface every time you drop a vendor from your pile, right? That's the way to think of it.
Yeah, I don't know where I was saying this, if it was on a show or off a show, but I was theorizing that you look at the solutions that are out there, and maybe Microsoft has some solutions that you can adopt that don't require you go get another solution from another third party. Because inherently, if you're a Microsoft shop, most companies are, you trust Microsoft. So I'm going to extend that trust and go, I'm going to let Microsoft do that for me because I don't have to go out to maybe someone like SolarWinds and get that extra management. The problem is large vendors like Microsoft don't do everything all that well, right? They do some things really well, and other things you're like, yeah, they sort of meet the requirements, but the reason people go get SolarWinds is because that meets requirements more closely to what they actually are, that the provider that you have to inherently trust already does, right? Do you have those conversations at like the CISO level, Alan, in your background? Like, how do you consolidate and make some of those decisions in guidance for our audience?
Absolutely. The Microsoft argument is always put forth by the business, because the business sees the benefits of consolidation, and they come to me and they want to know, well, why don't you want Microsoft for this particular niche of your shop? And the answer is just like you said, well, because it's a subpar solution, quite frankly. Anybody who tries to be everything is never going to be an A+ at everything, and there's always going to be somebody who only does the one thing and is an A+ at that one thing. So yes, these conversations take place all the time. They're usually business conversations. They're usually led by dollar conversations, and the security conversation is secondary. And there have been times that I've had to beat the drums so loudly, and there have been times I've lost that fight, for that matter. But even if you're looking at the point solutions of A+, I think you can visit your tech stack and look at what you're doing as a whole and still come up with reductions anyway. You know, like to your point, throw everything you can to Microsoft's way. And when you're not using Microsoft, make sure that it's strategic, make sure that one tech is actually needed and really adding value. Try to pick a technology that's covering multiple other techs, that it's, you know, every time you displace, try to displace more than one. A good example would be SASE. For example, like look at, you know, and I don't want to name names, but there's a very popular one out there that if you look at everything it's doing, you have to a certain extent displaced VPN, you've displaced VDI, you've displaced some identity and access management capability. You know, there's a lot of things you can do to dogpile onto the right tech, and always be scanning the field for that new tech that's going to let you pull two things from your shop and replace with one. Yeah.
I also feel like the telecommunications is one, you know, and we're trying to get a handle on it in my daily work, but, you know, I have to go to Zoom, and then you have to do the Skype, and then you have to do the Ring Central, and then your Teams for some. It's like the consolidation gives you that smaller attack surface and allows you to focus your security efforts on that one smaller tech stack, which is, I think, a huge benefit. If we talk about things you could do to really, truly increase the security posture of your organization, consolidation is key, but you don't want to cripple the business either.
Yeah. So yeah. You know, talking about the telecom, you know, I think that's a piece a lot of people wouldn't think about, you know, and I feel like the other big factor here, you know, we talked about just the depth of how many things you have, how many vendors you have, and places that you're getting, you know, code is coming into your organization that you have attack surface on, you know, but also, yeah, as a security leader, you know, there's the breadth of things you have to worry about. You know, I was joking in the Discord here, calling it security attention deficit syndrome. But honestly, you know, as a security leader, you know, or even as a whole team, you've got so many attention tokens, and you know, let's say 10 tokens and 3,000 things to spend them on. What do you spend them on? You know, do you spend them on attack surface? You know, like supply chain types of attacks, or, you know, like, and I think you're right, Alan, you know, talking about, you know, it starts with questionnaires, you know, figuring out where those gaps are. But I think that's one of the big challenges, is there's so many things vying for our attention as security leaders. How do we decide where to spend it?
Yeah, I think in general, you have to fall back on the basics. And this is where I said at the very beginning, you know, this shouldn't have changed too much about what we're doing today. The fact that the SolarWinds thing occurred shouldn't have changed too much, because at the end of the day, it's business first, risk second, technology third. And if you are assessing business risk appropriately, there will be times that significantly overlaps with third party. There will be times that third party is way off to the side. And even if, you know, whatever, we were talking about various examples. Let's say your Zoom somehow gets completely compromised, but you know for a fact that you only use Zoom for your marketing team. And, you know, the worst case scenario is somebody could hack the video call and learn about a marketing campaign a day or two before it's released. Like, what's the actual risk to the business? Very minimal, move on. Versus a vendor who's, say, a source code management, you know, let's say it's GitHub or somebody, you know, and all the crown jewels of your company is a tech company. That's the crown jewels. That's a vendor you're going to really focus that energy on. So to me, it's just the usual assessing business and assessing risk formula.
And it's a constant assessment too. You know, if there's one thing spending much of my life in technology, is that technology sometimes gets better and sometimes it gets worse, but you have to constantly assess it to learn where it's shifted. I feel like Teams is one of those things where I was like, wow, that's really crappy. And then you look at Skype for Business, I'm like, wow, that was even, if it's possible, that was like even crappier. But today, I was like, all right, Teams seems to be doing better. And so we started using Teams for our internal meetings. I'm like, actually, it's not bad, right? Like it actually gets better. So I think we have to constantly assess all these technologies, which is, we talk about job security, but that's not the point, is that constant assessment requires that constant effort and time.
And it's interesting having this conversation with vendors as well, talking to, I know a lot of folks over at Cisco. They're one of the primary sponsors behind B-Sides Knoxville, which I helped organize. And the particular team that I know a bunch of people from here in Knoxville, they assess a big part of what they do is looking for threats internally, looking for issues like supply chain type issues internally. And they talk about what a challenge it is, because Cisco makes, I forget how many acquisitions per year, but there's this constant influx of new technology, new companies with products. They might be hardware products, they might be software products, they might be in the cloud. And I say might, but I think they cover all three of those categories in every quarter of every year with their acquisitions. And this team has to, it takes time to go through all that, and you just hope that the team gets through it, before bad guys find anything in it.
Yeah, there's a real analog there with the M&A process, right? Any good CISO of any company that's done any acquiring, and the company knows, to properly use their CISO, the CISO gets brought forth into M&A always, and you end up having to do these types of deep investigations into the company and its practices, its attack surface, its controls. There's an analog there for sure. I think you're onto something, that the same vetting and the same diligence we do when we're about to acquire someone ourselves, maybe we take that and we apply that to the vendor community almost with the same amount of rigor. And again, it's a people and process story. Where's the money? Where's the time? But you're hitting on something there, I think.
Well, also there's the balance of that time and resources to swap out some technology. And when you look at that, I'll go back to SolarWinds for that example. I think there was some conversation at some point, since this broke, that, everyone should just rip out SolarWinds and replace it with something. I'm like, there was a reason why all those big companies in the Fortune 500 and governments used SolarWinds, and they've probably been using it for a long time. And in my experience, ripping and replacing something like that is not to be taken lightly. Also, I don't know if this is controversial or not, but I tend to see when a company does suffer a breach, they're like really secure after that. Like they've been through this exercise. Like if I were the CISO, I'd be like, look, we're sticking with SolarWinds, right? Because we're going to address the issue. We've done the evaluation. We use it for a reason. Here are the reasons. And you know what? They're going to be really secure moving forward. Is that not out of the realm of, the conversations that take place?
Oh, I think it's perfectly valid. We had at the beginning of the show the statement of, fatigue, alert and awareness fatigue, that eventually after 2 years you've given up, right? The company that got that breached that publicly, after 2 years, they have not given up. Yeah. They've got this deeply ingrained never again mantra, and they're going to live by that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's something I've always pointed out, talking about breaches over the years is, do you want to go with a company with the spotlight on them? Or do you want to go with one of their competitors that have never had that spotlight shown on them?
So stick with SolarWinds is what we're saying. I know it sounds backwards, but I really believe it's true.
Our lawyers would like us to say that's not an explicit endorsement.
Yes, that is correct. We are just, we're yammering is what we do, right? As podcast hosts.
was that an endorsement for Yammer?
Yeah, no.
Oh,
no.
Man, no.
Allan, tell us a little bit about your podcast that you started.
Yeah, so the Cyber Ranch podcast, the fundamental premise is I'm the sole host. We don't have a bunch of hosts, which puts a lot more burden on me. But what I'm trying to do is pick one expert guest each show. It'll be another CISO practitioner, somebody who's just really knowledgeable about some facet of the game. I'll interview that guest, peppering in a bit of my experience here and there, depending on how qualified I am to do so. The first show we're launching is actually, or one of the first shows we're launching anyway, is behavioral economics as it relates to cybersecurity. Like, this is a topic I know next to nothing about, so I'm letting the expert go. Other times it might be a more casual chat between two CISOs, but the idea is one topic per show. And the most important part is I want it to be a topic that the guest cares about. I want it to be something they're passionate about. And we're not just going to cover the topic. We're going to cover why are you passionate? What motivates you about this topic, about being in cybersecurity in general, and what keeps you in the game? So I think hearing about people's passions really aids the process when you're trying to understand and onboard the technical information as well.
Outstanding. Where can people find the new podcast, Allan?
Hacker Valley. I am with the Hacker Valley family now. So go to hackervalley.com. You'll see the Cyber Ranch podcast link right there on the menu. And I'm very proud and very happy to be working with those guys, Chris and Ron, over at Hacker Valley. Yeah, great stuff coming out of Hacker Valley. So outstanding. Allan, thank you for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly. That will conclude this episode for this week. Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching. See you next time.